Good morning everyone and welcome back to my channel English Literature. Today we're going to talk about the major works of Mark Twain. We have already discussed Mark Twain's literary achievement and his life through the timeline. Now in this video we are going to talk about his literary achievements and discuss some of his works in details. The Innocents Abroad. This book is a lively account of Mark Twain's travel in Europe and in the Holy Land. It was a best-selling of Mark Twain's works during his lifetime and one of the best-selling travel books of all time. The book has another title, The New Pilgrim's Progress. The Pilgrim's Progress by Bunyan. Do you remember them? And now there is the intrigue, The New Pilgrim's Progress. What is the New Pilgrim's Progress and it is written by whom? You can get confused, but don't get confused. It is written by Mark Twain and its original title or another title is The Innocents Abroad. Have a look at the next book, that is Roughing It. Roughing It. This book is a semi-autobiographical travel literature as a prequel to his first book, Innocents Abroad. So, if you go through the earlier video of Mark Twain, where we have discussed Mark Twain's life, and there we find that his life is a life of wanderer. He traveled a lot. He spent his time in Mississippi River as a pilot in boat. And actually his life is just like the life of Huck Finn. So in his literary package, you will find there are so many travelogues. And Roughing It is the next after Innocents Abroad. It follows the travels of young Mark Twain through the Wild West during the years 1861-1867. The work, within 79 chapters, illustrates many of Twain's early adventures, including a visit to Salt Lake City, gold and silver prospecting, real estate speculation, a journey to Hawaii, and his beginning as a writer. So Roughing It encompasses everything almost. The next book we'll talk, Gilded Age, The Gilded Age. The Gilded Age, he wrote this novel with his friend Charles Dudley Warner in 1873. In that novel, the members of the fictional Hawkins family are modeled on the Clemens. So this is very important. In which novel? The fictional Hawkins family, the fictional family is actually modeled on Clemens family, that is the Gilded Age. And what is the name of that family? The name of that family is Hawkins family. So Hawkins family is modeled on Clemens family. And Samuel's own fictional counterpart was Clay Hawkins. So Samuel Clemens was on the figure of Clay Hawkins. There are such 3 chapters. Twain and Warner took the novel's title from Shakespeare's King John. Again, another very, very important point you have to note. To gild refined gold, to paint the lily is wasteful and ridiculous excess. So, which of Mark Twain's novel is taken from Shakespeare's Shakespeare's play? That is The Gilded Age. And which of Shakespeare's play? Shakespeare's historical play, King John. The novel was most famous for naming and describing the post-Civil War era in America, characterized by an obsession for getting rich. The Gilded Age won Clemens widespread recognition. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Very important book. This fabulous adventure story can be enjoyed again and again by people of all ages. This famous novel was published in 1876. and featured a young boy, Tom, growing up in a small town along the Mississippi River and engaged in every type of adventures along with his friend Huckleberry Finn. So the route of Huckleberry Finn that we are going to encounter, that route is here in Tom Sawyer. This book has 35 chapters. The story is set in the town of St. Petersburg. So in which town the adventure of Tom Sawyer was set it is St. Petersburg. And that town was modeled on Hannibal, Missouri, where Twain grew up. In the story's introduction, Twain explained most of the adventures recorded in this book really occurred. One or two were experiences of my own. The rest of those boys were schoolmates of mine. So it is totally autobiographical. Tom Sawyer's Aunt Polly is modeled on Samuel's mother. It was adapted into film in 1938. A Tramp Abroad. A Tramp Abroad, this is one of Mark Twain's less popular travel books. So you have to keep in mind the travel books. If you are given 4 options and you have to choose among them, then you have to keep in mind what were the travelogues. The Tramp Abroad, the Innocent one second, Roughing It. And the Innocents Abroad, Roughing It, and then we find A Tramp Abroad. It is not so popular like the others, but it has wonderful sections on the Rhineland and the Alps. It has 50 chapters that describe the author's journey along with his friend Harris, who is modeled on his closest friend Joseph Twichell. So this is another important point to note. Harris was modeled on Joseph Twichell. So the character Harris in A Tramp Abroad was modeled on 4 options, and then you have to choose one. And you must choose Joseph Twichell. The prospect was to travel on foot, though ultimately they used other means of transport. The Prince and the Pauper. It is a very, very popular children book. This story is set in 16th century. Yeah, obviously anyone can read it, The Prince and the Pauper, but the children will like it most, I think so. It is set in the 16th century England, and it is a children's book. It is the first published in Canada in 1881 and then published in the United States in 1882. It is his first attempt to write historical fiction. So name the historical fiction by Mark Twain and then it will be The Prince and the Pauper. It tells the story of 2 young boys. One is a prince. And who was the prince in The Prince and the Pauper? That is Edward VI. So it is very, very important. And the other is Pauper. And what is the name of the Pauper? He is Tom Canty, who are identical in appearance and they will interchange their position. And what will happen next? You have to read the book. I will not be the spoiler. There are 33 chapters in this book. Life on the Mississippi. Life on the Mississippi, it is a long book. It is based on Samuel's time as a steamboat pilot. You must check the video that discussed the timeline of Mark Twain alias Samuel Clemens' life, and there you will find, then you read these books, then you can associate with those happenings of his life and then the reflection of those experiences of his life in his works. So Life on the Mississippi is based on his life as a pilot on the steamboat in Hannibal. It begins with a brief history of the river from its discovery by Hernando de Soto in 1542. This name you must note down. He describes the science of navigating the ever-changing Mississippi River in a section that was first published in 1876 under the title Old Times on the Mississippi. In the second half, Twain narrates his trip many years later on a steamboat from St. Louis to New Orleans. He describes the competition from railroads and the new large cities and adds his observation on greed, gullibility, tragedy, and bad architecture. So there is wide variety of themes you will find in this book. The book is really wide, and there are 60 chapters, and the theme that he deals with here is also variegated. Now, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Who is Huckleberry Finn? Tom Sawyer's friend. And we met Huckleberry Finn first in Tom Sawyer. Now, this is a sequel to the Adventure of Tom Sawyer. But it is a very different type of story. Huck narrates the novel, which is filled with humor and adventure. It can be enjoyed by children, but older readers will find deeper meanings in it. Huckleberry Finn was a great success in his time, but at the same time it was condemned as inappropriate for children for the use of language that Huck was using, and some racial slurs like nigger. And there are 42 chapters and a final episode. A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. It is not the book, it is a theatre, it is a picture of the adaptation, it's film adaptation. This novel is about a 19th century man thrown back into 6th century England, like a science fiction type, and name of the person is Hank Morgan, like time traveling. So who is that time traveler in Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court? Hank Morgan. He is the protagonist who lived in the 9th century in Hartford, Connecticut. After a blow to his head, he awakens to find himself transported back to the time of King Arthur in the 6th century. There are 44 chapters in this novel, and this novel was adapted into film in 1931 and music in 1949. So it was famous. The American Claimant. It is a brief sequel to The Gilded Age. Do you remember Gilded Age? We have traveled a lot. Sorry. Yeah, The Gilded Age. So from here the sequel came after so many long time. Here, The American Claimant. Clemens wrote this novel with the help of phonographic dictation. You have to remember this point. And Clemens claimed that he is the first author, first writer who is using this device in writing a novel. Okay. Sorry. There are 25 chapters in this book, and the novel starts with a beautiful line. It is a matchless morning in rural England. On a fair hill we see a majestic pile, the ivied walls and towers of Cholmondeley Castle, a huge relic and witness of the baronial grandeurs of the Middle Ages. Puddinhead Wilson. This novel is about switched identities. Slavery, murder, and the meaning of race. This novel is written in an ironic tone and was serialized in the Century magazine. So in which magazine this novel was serialized? The Century magazine. Before it was published as a novel in 1894. The setting is a fictional Missouri frontier town of Dawson's Landing on the banks of Mississippi River in the first half of the 19th century. David Wilson, a young lawyer, is branded as Puddinhead. Why? So you have to keep in mind the character. Who is the Puddinhead? David Wilson, because a neat tweet by the actually the Puritan had it is a neat tweet by local people. The townspeople look down upon him for his hobby of collecting fingerprints and see him as eccentric. So what was the hobby of David Wilson? Collecting fingerprints. So these are important for short question. Tom Sawyer Abroad. In this brief novel, Tom, Huck, and Jim became accidental passengers on a wonderful balloon. Again, it is like a type of science fiction craft that carries them to North Africa. There they survive after their encounters with wild animals like lions, robbers, and fleas. Okay, robbers are also wild animals in the sense of it. They also visit some of the world's greatest wonders, including the pyramids, the Sphinx. The story is narrated by Huck Finn. It is a parody of Jules Verne's adventure. So, in which piece of book Mark Twain parodized Jules Verne? That is Tom Sawyer Abroad. Next, Tom Sawyer Detective. It is the third sequel to the Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Now, what was the second one? Do you remember? First one, Tom Sawyer, the Adventure of Tom Sawyer, then Huckleberry Finn. And the third is not obviously this one. This one is a parody. And the third one is Tom Sawyer Detective. While visiting Tom's relatives in Arkansas, Tom and Huck get involved in a murder case. So, what was the location you remember? Arkansas. And the before we read this one, it was North Africa. Tom and Huck get involved in a murder case and Tom displays his best detective skills. It is written in a burlesque style, satirizing contemporary detective novels. It is again a parody type. Here the narrator is Huck and there are 11 chapters. Personal recollections of Joan of Arc. This long novel is about Joan of Arc. We all know about Joan of Arc. We have read Saint John by Bernard Shaw and we also read about Joan's life. It is in 100 Years' War, in French history. It is presented as a translation from a manuscript by J. Francis Alden. Originally, you have to remember this source. Okay. Originally, the novel was published as a serialization in Harper's Magazine beginning in 1895 and it was published in book form in 1896. The narrator, who is the narrator? De Conti. He is a fictional character who is Joan of Arc's page and accompanied her during three major phases of her life. As a youth in Domremy, as the commander of the army of Charles VII of France on the military campaign, and as a defendant at her trial in Rouen. The book is divided into three parts. Following the equator or more tramps abroad. Twain was bankrupt in 1894 due to his failed investment in a typesetting machine. In an attempt to pay the debt, he undertook a journey to the British Empire in 1895. During this time, he provides lectures in the English language. The starting point of his lecture trip was Paris. It recounts Mark Twain's accounts of his travels in Australia, New Zealand, India, and South Africa. He was a famous lecturer and speaker. Extract from Adam's diary and Eve's diary, sometimes published together as the diaries of Adam and Eve. They are also published separately and also together. These short books are amusing stories about life in the Garden of Eden. A Horse's Tale. This short novel was written partially in the voice of Soldier Boy, who is Buffalo Bill's favorite horse. Harper's Magazine originally published the story in two installments in August and September of 1906. So, Soldier Boy is not a boy. He is Buffalo Bill's favorite horse. So don't get confused with the name. Twain wrote the story after a request from actress Minnie Madden Fiske to assist in her calls against bullfighting. So it was a request book. You have to keep in mind the name who requested him to write this. And Twain's daughter, who died in 1896 at the age of 24 of spinal meningitis, is the inspiration of the character Cathy Allison. So Cathy Allison was modeled on Twain's daughter. And I cannot remember the name who died in meningitis. You will find it in Mark Twain's timeline live video. The video on Mark Twain's life, and there you will find his two daughters, and one died in spinal meningitis. So that daughter is the inspiration of the character Cathy Allison. Extract from Captain Stormfield's visit to heaven. This is a delightful story that describes the experience of an old seafarer after he arrives in heaven. Number 44, The Mysterious Stranger. The title is quite interesting. The story was not published until nearly 60 years after Mark Twain died. You can imagine, 60 years after Mark Twain died. It is about an angel with supernatural powers who visits a village in Austria in 1490. A type of fantasy. It is Clemens' final novel. He worked over it sporadically from 1890 to 1910. It ends abruptly, signifying that Twain died before finishing it. It has 11 chapters. Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer among the Indians and other unfinished stories. They are actually published together. It was not published until Mark Twain died. There are 3 lively stories in which Tom and Huck are characters, but these stories are unfinished. You can understand that. Now, apart from these works mentioned above, Mark Twain wrote numerous letters, essays, pamphlets, speeches, criticism, travelogues, and short stories. You can find a book, the collection of Mark Twain's short stories, and you can read that. He is a very his approach is humorous and lively and drawn to life, vivid. Actually, whatever he wrote from his personal experience. So there is more truth mixed with fantasy. So thank you for staying with Mark Twain, and thank you for staying with me.